Hey, world history folks. This is Mr. Lamont. We're going to do our test review for Unit 10. We're going to start with our limericks, and then I've got a smartboard review that we can put in front of you, and you can do some practice with as well. So let's start off with our limericks. If you've not done the limericks yet, you should probably take a minute to pull those up and see which blanks you can figure out. Go ahead and push pause on this, come back to it later. See which ones you can do on your own. Maybe get somebody on the phone, work on it with them. You guys can go back and forth a little bit. And then once you've got most of them and you need a little help, come back to here. All right, so here we go. Crop rotation, new foods, and technology made agriculture boom. Population growth meant more workers and a need for a power loom, one of those inventions. Number 3, England was first with coal and iron, colonies, and lots of dough. Making cotton, textiles, thanks US and India, where they got the cotton from, in cottages no mo. Remember, the cottage system was making things in your house. Now they're going to start moving to factories. A global economy, more slavery, whether it was African slavery or wage slavery, remember. Cities with factories and less room. Okay, so that was the beginning. Let's go top right. In Berlin, 1884, a conference for the scramble of Africa was made. King Leopold of Belgium, a magnificent cake we would invade. Colonized it entirely, all but 2 were overcome. Only Liberia, remember the American colony, and Ethiopia remained independent as a kingdom. Britain, France, Germany, and Spain, all examples of Europe upon Africa, it preyed. Not prayer like Christian prayer, but prayed like lions eating gazelles prayed. Okay, middle left. James Watt used steam to make industrial machines run well. Fulton put steam on a boat, and Diesel built an engine to make transportation swell. Whitney's interchangeable parts and Edison's light bulb made work move along quick. Bessemer's steel process meant stronger, cheaper, taller buildings, no more brick. Morse's code meant the distance for communication did fell. That's kind of weak, I know. Don't hate me. All about all of our inventors. Remember your chart. Spend some time reviewing your chart. What they did and what the impact was. Focus on the impact. All right, on the right, China hid behind the Great Wall until the English wanted tea. Trading opium, not silver, made the Chinese fight to be free. The Opium War and the Boxer Rebellion showed China could not compete. Same in India, where tea, cotton, and opium filled the British East Indian Company fleet. Even when the sepoys mutinied for Queen Victoria, a crown jewel India would be. Okay, now we've got our final limerick. Pull it down, bottom left. As industry grew, Europe needed to imperialize materials and markets to get. Competing with each other, claiming colonies was their best bet. Some went burdened, notice in quotations, white man's burden, a missionary spirit to heathen poor. David Livingstone took Christianity inland from the African shore. Protectorates were possessive, and spheres of influence meant our trade was set. Okay, so those are the causes of imperialism and the types of imperialism. That came from 10.2, the first part. All right, so now let's turn our attention to a smartboard review. So what I'll do is I'll show you the first page and explain the process. And then you can pause and try and work this out. And then I'll advance it to the next page, which has the answer. So I've got 3 of these pages. First one here is putting things in order. Can you take these events, make sure you can see them well here, put them in order. Now there's a few of these guys, it's going to be tricky to figure out because they kind of happen at the same time. So you might actually line a couple of them up, and that's okay too. All right, so go ahead and push pause and put these together. All right, so coming back, here is the solution. So at the beginning, we're still doing things with the cottage system, still working at home. But then we're going to have some changes. For instance, the seed drill and the iron plow are invented, and they start using the idea of crop rotation. Instead of the 3-field system where they weren't using a field, now they're going to rotate the crops. So the food supply will then increase. As the food supply increases, the population is going to rise. More people, more food, more people. Now you can have an argument as to where this fits right here, the enclosure movement, because it was kind of happening in this area, but to a certain degree it starts happening once the population starts growing, and then the richer, larger farms start cutting off the smaller farms, which sends all these people to the city to work in factories. Then we started to have some of these inventions which allow for the textile industry to develop. And here's another one of those ones that you can kind of put differing orders, but for the most part, the factories on the rivers came first. And then they started to realize the power of steam, thanks to some of our inventors. But again, it's the key is to recognize that the agricultural revolution led to the industrial revolution, kind of like the C quiz question, the one that was false, which basically said the industrial revolution had people with making more food. It was vice versa. More food helped to cause the industrial revolution. All right, so let's turn to the second page. All right, so you've got a list of inventors, and you just need to group them up. I will tell you that there is one inventor who gets 2 of these things. So I'm going to push pause, or you push pause, and work on connecting them, and then restart it to get the answers. Okay, so James Watt, remember kilowatt, that's our measure of power, is known for not inventing the steam engine, but kind of streamlining it, making it more useful. Thomas Edison, of course, for the light bulb and for getting electricity into homes at a larger level. Elias Howe, the sewing machine. A lot of women joined the workforce because of the sewing machine. Eli Whitney was our person who had 2 inventions. He's known for interchangeable parts, which is kind of the predecessor of the assembly line, and the cotton gin, which allowed for cotton to be grown faster in the South, unfortunately. Henry Bessemer realized how to make steel by taking iron ore and heating it, blowing cold air through it. So he made a stronger material, which allowed them to build taller, stronger, longer lasting. Edmund Cartwright and James Hargreaves are 2 of your textile inventors. Cartwright with the power loom and James Hargreaves with the spinning jenny both helped to make textiles the first industry. Robert Fulton put steam engines connected to boats to turn paddle wheels. So now we have boats who can cross the ocean quicker and work upstream on rivers like the Mississippi. And then Samuel Morse develops a code, a way of communicating by wire. As long as you could string an electric wire, you could send messages near instantly. Okay, let's move on to the third page. Okay, we've got 3 countries, Africa, there's India down here, and China. So you want to think about how can I move these different characteristics to what it was like in each of these 3 Southern Hemisphere nations. Well, China's not Southern Hemisphere, but nations in Southeast Asia and Africa, and what it was like for them during imperialism. So go ahead and push pause, try and move them. Okay, so over here in Africa, one of the colonies was named Rhodesia, named after that British entrepreneur. It'd be like if Bill Gates bought his own country. in Southeast Asia and called it Gaetsia. Right? What were they getting out of Africa? Lots of materials and natural resources. You know, one of the quiz questions was false because it said Europe wanted to imperialize Africa because of its large population and food supplies. No, they wanted to colonize Africa because of raw materials like copper, rubber, iron, gold, diamonds. Remember the nickname that King Leopold gave it, the Magnificent African Cake? And there are many colonies made in Africa. Let's go down to India, bottom right. So what products were they getting out of India? Cotton, tea, and opium. The tea, of course, was a big one. Cotton, when the British started to look elsewhere, when they stopped looking at America for cotton, they started looking to India. Remember the Sepoy Mutiny? Was those the soldiers that were actually hired and created by the British to force the Indians to stay under their rule, and then the Sepoys rebelled. And we would call it a colony because there's only one, the crown jewel. And then in China, you might remember the Opium War was fought, similar to the Boxer Rebellion. This frustrated Chinese government, peasants, rulers, etc., tried to force Europe back outside. Both of those failed. Key products, tea, silk, and porcelain. We've been talking about those for a while. Go back to the Silk Road. Whoops. Independent Liberia is in the wrong spot. I don't know if anybody quickly noticed that. It belongs over here. That was one of those colonies that was never colonized by the Europeans. Okay, spheres of influence. Remember, we did not conquer China, so to speak, Europe and the United States. We just forced them to trade with us in certain spheres of influence. And then their nickname, the Middle Kingdom, helps us to remember that this is a place that had tried to be isolated for centuries, but they were forced to trade. Last but not least, you notice that British control is in the middle because it has connections to all three of these different colonized nations or imperialized nations. Okay, so that wraps up the review.